we will be moving on to our next speaker. See, Jeffrey. Yes, I think we have connectivity, we have bandwidth, we have everything, and it's time to hear Jeff's story entitled
Okay.
"Hear Him Out."
Okay. So thank you, John. Sorry for the technical difficulties earlier, no. So my story, I think I wanted to start with sharing that many things have changed, no, in the past few months. Ika nga nila, change is coming, right? That's we've been hearing that as a buzzword of the last few years, I guess. And if the lockdown had a theme, I guess it would be change, no? Because so many things have changed in this lockdown, drastic changes. The shift from the number of COVID cases every day, we see that in the news. The status of the quarantine from TCQ to GCQ and so on and so forth. And even my own activities have changed. Like my last stretch of classes have definitely been affected in the past. And well, I also used to have a restaurant that I co-owned with a couple of partners, and that unfortunately had to close down because of everything that was happening. And I also volunteer in this regular retreat that we run for the youth, and that's had to be put on hold, sadly. And our lives and our perceptions have really just changed throughout all of this, and our routines have changed drastically too. And as an extrovert, being put away from all of that, being put away from the people who you surround yourself with a very regular basis can be a daunting change, really. And gone are the nights where you can just chill with your friends at night, having this regular flow of life. It's just gone. And for everyone else in the world, though, our connection to people is affected one way or another, be it in school or work or birthdays, weddings, you name it. Everything is different now. And sure, we have social media, but to an extent, that can be a little bit different. Especially to me, meeting people is something very personal. And when I meet new people, I always make it a point to meet people in person. And that's just something very different. And this whole change was scary. It was unsettling. And as much as I wanted to keep a positive mindset throughout all of this, so we're in sometime in March, I was very positive. Oh, it's going to end soon. It's going to be over soon. But all I had to do was just open my phone, look at the news, and I feel the whole gloom of the sadness and the depression hit me like a ton of bricks. Until one day, a friend of mine, Brennan, he approached me and said that a group of friends and he and his friends were going to start this podcast. And the thing about this group of friends is that they claim that they don't like speaking in public. So they asked me and another friend of mine, Nina Alvia, to co-host this podcast that they were going to start. And I think that just came at just the right time to me. It gave me some sort of comfort, knowing that I was going to have more human contact on a regular basis. And somehow along the way, I got to interact with new people, like the guests and so on and so forth. And somehow the lockdown didn't feel so lonely anymore. Somehow that began to usher in another change in me, from dragging through my day every day to channeling my energies into something more meaningful and productive. No. However, of course, in the course of the lockdown, things had never just pleasant all the time. I personally found it a struggle, like most people, to engage in things, to be curious, to learn things. Uh, it came to the point where I was downright irrational already and being irritable. But I think this whole idea of me being complacent and not being able to listen to others is a deep rooted problem in myself. It just got accentuated or highlighted more in this pandemic because to an extent, I've gotten so used to being alone. Uh, I forget what it's like to listen to other people. I forget what it's like to really pay attention. And here in the like, it's a very common example in the dinner table when you're talking with your family. I catch myself insisting my ideas, my viewpoints, my opinions, forcing it down onto others. No, not really just listening to what they have to say, not knowing that I could take something away from them. And that's the problem. The problem is I'm so caught up with going against the flow, going because we're all as a young person. There's always this challenge that you have to do something for yourself, go against the flow. But maybe looking at it differently, maybe there's a way to work with it, not just so much going against it. I'd like to call it like dancing with the flow. Sometimes it's going back and forth, the dialogue, seeing the value in that conversation, seeing the value in exchange of ideas is something that I tend to overlook even. And maybe that was a new approach that I had to take, considering all things happening right now. And those are the things that we applied in our podcast to fortify the statement that no matter what this person was saying, he had something worth sharing. And I think that's very similar to what we're doing here in Shorts. That's what the team is doing here in Shorts. I resonate very much with this whole idea. It's very personal to me. And what better time to come up with something where we listen to each other now that we're locked down, stuck in our homes in pandemic. And maybe, just maybe, we could bring some order into all of these things by starting to listen to each other more. In fact, working in the podcast as a team, there are times when we have disagreements among the other members of the team. I mean, but I personally felt that there was some point of contention. Maybe that was just for me, but that was a test, how we would move forward. We were deciding on a certain direction. It was a test for us how we would move forward with how we were going to plan. Would we walk or talk? Listen to each other, or would we insist that this way is better than the other? And thankfully, we went the way that we wanted to go to. And so we're all very just new at this whole thing. This whole podcasting is very new to me and my co-host. I'm very appreciative of the feedback that they give us as hosts. And at the same time, I'm also very happy that every time I give input and I have feedback suggestions, the ideas are always met with openness and respect. Because when we're kept to our own habits and we're kept to ourselves for a very long time, there is always this tendency for us to think, oh, the world will revolve around me. And that's not wrong to some extent until it becomes a habit. But looking at it in the grand scheme of things, by listening to the people who give me this feedback and this input, I learn to understand the rest of the team. I've learned to understand and listen to the guests that we have on the show. And I think it's through listening and understanding each other that I get to integrate my own beliefs and ideas into what everyone else is sharing. And so now, as I continue to learn and change, I'm always reminded that I have to develop the skill of, and I think that's the challenge then for everyone, that even if we're not aware or conscious of it, we have to develop the skill of actively listening and listening critically, not just taking in everything that we hear, but actually processing it, understanding it. As a host, then, I'm guilty of always thinking ahead. Or what can I say next? What can I react to this certain person? But maybe changing that framework of listening to what the person is saying and then just processing that and reacting to what you think. We have a segment in the show where we ask our guests, it's usually at the very end, where we ask the guests, what's one thing that you want to say that isn't heard enough? And honestly, that's always the part that gets me, because that's when I realize there's so much more that we can bring to discussion. There's so much more that we can learn from each other. And now, especially in a time where we all feel locked down, not just by the quarantine, but there are certain forces that are going against the liberties that we hold so dear. We are being silenced in many ways. And all the more we have to engage, all the more we have to talk to each other about, all the more we have to keep vigilant. We cannot be passive or complacent despite everything that's going on. The forces will tell us, okay, it's quarantine, you just do whatever you want. But that leads to other things that might not lead us in the right path. And so really, the world is an uncertain place, always changing. It's different, especially now. And also, the world is unique. No, we can't approach every single thing the same way. It's a Heraclitean river. No, we can't step into the same river twice. Something about that river would have changed. And that's how we should approach things, I think. That's how we approach things in the podcast as well. And it's only that we start realizing that this is the way we should do things looking forward. That's the way we should be doing all of these things from the beginning. It's just that, we're also all caught up. It's only now we get to realize we have time to quiet down and listen. Maybe we can start overcoming this whole pandemic, this whole crisis together. And that will only start happening when we start listening to each other and hearing each other out. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Sorry, hindi ko alam tapos ka na. I wasn't listening. No, napakahalaga po talaga. Thank you. Very, very wise words from a very young graduate of political science sa UP Diliman and restaurateur and avid tea enthusiast. Yes. Maraming salamat sa iyo at sa iyong very wise words. Tama mga kaibigan, always listen. If you don't want to listen, at least makinig kayo. Di ba?